Hello, everyone. Hey, David.
Hello.
Let's see. Let me get the doc open. Let me share my screen. All right. Can you guys see my screen and the doc?
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. It is May 19th. May 19th, 25. All right. Um, all right. And then if you guys could sign yourselves in, and we can kind of go through some of the GitHub issues because it's there's been some discussions in there quite a bit. So let's take a look at agenda. All right, here it is. All right, so this is the first issue we'll take a look at. So this is cloud events and CD events by Thompson. So taking a look at this, I'm not too sure what he meant, to be honest. Uh,
He provide
so,
an example below. What
uh,
what he suggests, roughly, is to use HTTP headers, and it means moving context into HTTP headers using Cloud Events headers. In fact,
um, so this is, I think, his lack of knowledge on the two different modes that Cloud Events works in. So Cloud Events actually had something called structured and binary. Um, Actually, yeah. So there's actually technically three or four, but those are the two important ones. And for structured mode is what we do today, which is the context and the subject all in one payload. That is typically the better approach, and the reason why is going with this style that some protocols may not support binary mode. So that's why uh structured mode is the more preferred one. And plus, the only reason that this quote unquote binary mode exists is that when you have an existing system, right, and you have an API, it's easier to add headers than to change all your API definitions, right? So that's why binary mode exists. So like I said, I'm still a little bit unsure why he thinks that the current approach is not cloud events, because it's just not binary mode, it's structured mode. And if his use case is because he already has a pre-existing system and he doesn't want to change his API definitions, that makes total sense. But from his explanation, I didn't really understand it. So that's why I was a little confused. So I'll respond back to this. But does that make sense? Like what I'm talking about, David, that there's two modes, structured and binary, and the reason why binary mode exists is for pre-existing systems that don't want to do the overhaul to support the full CD events, which is the structured mode. Does that make sense?
Yes, I'm don't know enough cloud events to answer. My opinion, maybe I will answer, is that our context part contains now more information than just the cloud events part, and we want to be able to have those information without cloud events. For me, cloud events is just a wrapper, and the way we made it, it's we copy information from context into the header part to be compliant, but
Yeah, yeah.
I'm
I mean,
I'm less for a so coupled integration between both, but I don't have all the history and the discussion.
oh, gotcha, gotcha. Yeah, I mean, to be frank, like we technically don't even need cloud events. I mean, if you think about it, CD events technically only supports HTTP and JSON, right? And what cloud events allows is for more agnostic protocol based systems or services, and we don't use any of that. So I don't know the past reasoning of why we chose it. So I mean, but since we've already chose it, you know, we should just use it, right? Because it's going back now would be too much of a of a friction for everyone. So I think just continue with structured mode is the approach. And yes, we do provide a little bit extra information. I think I might have to do a little bit. I think cloud.com cloud events. Um I think the big thing, let me go to schemas real quick. Cloud events. Oh, it's not gonna be the schemas, I don't think. Let me see if I can find context attributes. So the context has the type, which we do provide, ID, source, spec version type. Yeah, so we have everything. So it literally we don't provide more. It's except for links and links is the only addition that I think that is
No, we
outside of the
also schema URI that DC also try to push to use more for custom stuff.
oh
And
yeah, yeah. So yeah, schema URI is also an extra one. But like I said, that's not something that we can just that we can add, right? Like cloud events allows us to add any sort of information, right? So I think because like what it is just basically an envelope. So we can do whatever we want with it, right? So it's less about like you don't even need to think about cloud events when you're doing CD events technically. It's just the SDKs weren't built in such a way, which like I said, we'll fix that later. Like the Go and the Java one specifically weren't built in such a way where it hides cloud events, but that is something that we need to address and do. So I think I'll reach back out for more information and specify that we do in fact rely on cloud events fully, but just using structured mode. All right. And then Rashid, I see you have joined. Also, please sign in when you get a chance and welcome. So we're just going through the GitHub issues now. And then, all right, so this is the big one. So let me see, because I know Thompson had a recent. So a little bit of context for this one. So this is just defining how interoperability will work within or with CD events. And so it's very, very thorough. Like we have this idea of like this base event that we talked about, and then these segments. And one thing, so I think Thompson, let me see what his last comment was, because I've been trying to figure out what he's been, oh, this open interoperability. So okay, so I think Dedisi's already on top of it and already, yeah, on the same page. Let me see. Uh, uh, uh. Yeah, it makes okay. Yeah. So one thing that what Thompson was suggesting here was creating a separate org called Open Interoperability, which is, in my opinion, a little bit redundant because that's what CD event is trying to do. It's just not called that. So and it's trying to do that, but we're starting at the very, very low level. And what DC is trying to bring to the table now is solving the like we have the low level components, but we need to do more with them to actually make it interoperable. So that's what this proposal is for. Um,
Yeah, I
and
responded to his I like his enthusiasm though. It's
oh
like,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
no,
no,
it's
he's
fantastic. Yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. And this is what it's supposed to be, right? We're supposed to discuss it and see where this is
Mhm.
going.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and I did meet with Fidelity before the call.
Oh, cool, cool,
Um,
cool.
so yeah. Yeah, any feedback, guys, on the idea overall? I mean, you know, post CDCon, I would love for us to be pushing at some of this stuff kind of aggressively,
Hmm.
to kind of close it out, to kind of get the conduit started. And I'll start working on the companies to come together and talk about the architecture and then, come up with a full design.
Yeah, yeah. Did you have a chance to look at this, David, at all? Or did you need some time to read through it?
Yes, I read twice.
Oh,
Uh,
you read it twice. Okay. Any comments?
no, for me it's too high levels and meta. Like Tom, I don't see yet the combination is really about high level workflow description for me,
Hmm.
and it's how I read the CDEvents just to be able to graph the workflow and to be able to provide this high level view, I guess.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
I have some difficulties to see how to use it, implement the details. Uh, Currently, I'm focused on evil is in the details. So
Yeah.
I have nothing against, but nothing pro. It's a good idea. It's one of the needs, but I don't know yet how it fits. At least in the needs I have in the past or etc.
Yeah,
So
it's
no.
counterintuitive to eventing. It's like it's backwards from how most people think about like you're you're usually you have a bus and people subscribe to the bus for their own needs, but that in itself becomes untenable at scale. And so being able to centralize where you process the event um, is literally what all this really gives you. Instead of having to do it in a distributed way, you can process many events under one system so that multiple events across different systems can actually be enacted on from a single place.
Yes, but it's when I read and today when I reread the comments, it looks like BPM and all this kind of feature when company tries to create those high-level graph and orchestration. So there are a lot of similitude with workflow, etc. So today
So
I'm too far off
No,
to have
you're
a real
you
opinion, useful opinion.
yeah, no, you hit right on it. It lets you to it allows you to build the graph for your SDLC workflow for each individual, entire workflow as one pipeline um, that actually traverses multiple systems. And because the systems themselves become, tool agnostic, you can have the same set of code and reaction work for Jenkins and Tecton doing CI operations. And so that's the real goal. So it doesn't matter what tool that the people are using, you can always react to the events the same way.
and then real quick, David, just so I'm understanding where the high level it might be the whole thing, but I'm wondering, are you talking about more of this that you don't understand where you can potentially use it, or is it more of the segments and the definitions here? Which or is it the whole thing? Like I'm just trying to understand where the ambiguity lies for the usage for you.
Um, if we use the details when it's not the segment, etc., but as an examples, also I think he tried to create it in one of the comments is the pipeline. When you graph the workflow, you have you could have some exit point like error handling in commands programming. If your test fails, it's not the same workflow than if your tests are okay. And how you will handle promotion, etc., depends of the result. It's not the step that is running, is also what is the result of the step. Published artifact, to the example, another example, is we successfully published the artifact. But what happened if we failed, etc., before?
And what happens? Yeah, actually, me and Dedisi talked a little bit about that. I mean, we wanted to start with something first, and we have an idea on how to solve that particular problem with the definitions. But right now, it's just like you can just think about it as like the best like success case for the flow for the workflow definition, just to get the idea across. And then with the like you said, like with the failure cases versus success cases, and maybe it's based off result, the system does something else. But we have talked about it, but it's just not in this particular document today. But
it's actually an implementation detail at that point, right? Because
it's why I said implementation. I'm more on the side of implementation. And
no, but that's great. That's
Evil's details.
Yeah, no, but that's great. That's absolutely great, because you do understand that, that some of these events aren't going to work, or some of these pipelines are going to fail. And we need to be able to either, under the orchestrator itself, the centralized orchestrator, make a decision to start a different pipeline and then track the flow differently, or in the YAML where you declare your workflow, have alternative paths or have failure paths. And both of those things solve the problem. And to Ben's point, like we talked about it and we thought about it, and being able to bring that, the fact that you're there, but David, I mean, you're super smart, so I'm not expecting you not to be there. But it is an implementation detail, and it's something we will have to think about long term, how we want to represent that either in the workflow YAML, or is this an orchestration behavior where you want to say alternative paths, and how do you want to introduce that, and how many do you want to make available? And when you think of a tool like Spinnaker, that the tool itself can do that, then you also have to be able to account for that in the logic structure of, like, some of the systems may contain their alternate paths as well. And then do you lose the alternate path, or do you say that the alternate path is in that system as well, so that you know how to follow along with those events? And so that becomes the context for the implementation. Like, how do we make sure that we are always aware of the events that this workflow might actually produce? Most of this is accounted for in how Ben wrote the link service, which is actually really cool.
Yeah. Thank you, Dedisi. And yeah, and David too, like, because I know you're working on that the CDEvents viz, right? That you have in your repo. Like this, so I think this is something that could be useful to maybe not this particular orchestrator itself, but I know these definitions could be, right? Because this will give you a lot more context, and then the workflow definitions, like you can pre-fill like a visual for that. So I know there's use cases for your particular project that you're working on. So it's just a matter of figuring out like Dedisi and you were just talking about, just these kind of like implementation details, and whether or not Conduit makes sense for your particular systems.
Yeah, in my particular system, because I use an opposite approach, like as we mentioned previously, is I will try to guess. It's one of the final goal is to guess this graph, and from all the metrics and information, being able to say, hey, currently that is the graph maybe used in the team A, and that is the graph used for the team B. And maybe someone can then at the platform of in other companies say, hey, we have some difference between the workflow between team A and team B, how to reconcile, etc. So I try more to guess or to detect this graph and to provide this real I say information instead of it is one of the goals to derive far from it.
Yeah, a lot of people are trying to. Oh, sorry, Ben.
Oh no, I think you're about to say the exact same thing as me, did you see?
Oh, yeah, because a lot of people are trying to guess what the, like you're describing, David is trying to extrapolate what happened after the fact based on the thing that happened. I think the key difference about what we're proposing is we want them to tell us up front. This is what we expected it to do, so that then we're monitoring that progress. But also, this will then let you compare process overall. Because if you have a enterprise data lake of all of these CDEvents that you can now link together with an intended graph where the people are saying, I meant to do X, you're not extrapolating at all. You have their intent, and then you can begin to evaluate process by how effective it is. It's the guessing portion of it that we're all trying to do that we were trying to remove with this concept.
Yes, it's the difference of guessing and orchestrate. But it's also one way. It's why I say I have no very no way to comment in pro or cons in this approach because it's not.
It's pretty foreign.
Yes, and in the past I got a lot of issue with BPM, Argo events when we try to graph cross tools and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a little bit skeptic about the stuff, but the goal is, yes, if we are able to graph the software life cycle, go for it.
Yep.
And as well, like, I mean, I'm all for guessing as well, but I feel like, especially if you get into weird edge cases, like that can get you into like a world of hurt. Especially like if the graphs are like sporadic too, like it kind of happen like where you can't really detect something with confidence. But with this, it's very, very blunt. It's like this is the definition, so you always know. So I feel like that will simplify most people's, if not all people's, design of what they're expecting, and what to provide to their end users, right? When they're trying to visualize things or look at metrics, etc., right? So I definitely, I'm not telling you not to guess, but I want to say it's a little bit of, you can get into a little bit of like scary behavior if you're not careful. So like definitely consider thinking about this in terms of the workflow definition, having it up front and seeing how that can maybe simplify your system. Maybe a good way of going about it, because since you already have an implemented system and kind of thinking about it now, if you had this workflow definition, what would it change? Maybe we're missing something. So that's the feedback that me and DC need. So if you could spend some time doing that, that would be fantastic. All right. So was there any other comments that we had? I know this was a pretty big proposal. I mean, there's a lot of information here. But it seems like it's pretty well received. I mean, to the like to the point where people are suggesting whether we should have a different org for this, right? But I think it's definitely going in the right direction. So yeah, we'll just keep out on the comments. So David, please, any comments that you have, always please add them to the GitHub issue. And then, all right, let's now go to the next one. Okay, so this is, I saw you had a couple comment, or you had the one comment. All right, so can you give us a little bit of outline what you're trying to say here, David? Because I didn't get a chance
yes,
to read
I
this.
just provide an example of one of component I generate today by examples for GitHub.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just to say that often just the ID, it's about the merge, yes. For the ID, I need more than just the ID, just to express, to show, to etc. So in this example, and I go update also, it says I provide the subject ID. That is what it's as it follow. But the rules say normally that the source, if we don't provide a source for subject,
then use this one.
We should use the source from the context. But
Mm-hmm.
the source from the context, in my case, already include the ID. Why? Because if you look at the subject ID in this specific case, it's not the task ID by itself. It's a concatenation of the task ID and the run ID. Because in GitHub, we can retry etc. and to be able to do the distinction between two attempts, I have to add this information. Else, when I create link or report information, I will link to the wrong data. So
right.
It's one example of why I think source on the subject part. I don't talk, but on subject part, we should not differentiate source and ID. It should be an ID like we have a URI. It's one way to identify an element. Like it's done for artifact ID. Today for artifact ID, when the ID in the subject of type artifact, it's a full ID, PKG, etc., and it matches exactly the artifact ID that is used in other events.
Right. Okay. So how I understood, and like I said, I think this is just because the ambiguity of everything in CDEvents. How I understood source is that it would be like
if you scroll up, you have the I copy paste the definition to it at the top of above.
Okay, sorry. Here.
Yes,
right.
I copy paste the.
So this is from the this is from the table, but there's actually another CDEvents page, right? That actually has a better definition.
It's from the spec page.
Yeah. Give me one second. Let me show you the one that I think is a little bit more useful. Let me see where is this one? This one is in.
And also, it's introduced some difficulty where we create the evidence store simply because ID is related to the unicity of ID is scoped to the context, to the source, sorry. But it's start to become a mess where you have a lot of events from different source and system, and the ID can overlap. If we just use the ID, it can overlap. So it means that in evidence store, we have to manage always two fields for an ID instead of one that is the ID, the global ID. It means replacing local ID by global ID.
Oh, sorry, I was reading the wrong one. You put subject first. I thought this was context. Okay, so that's why I was like, why does this definition look different? Okay, so yeah, so this is one I was looking at. So this is the producer, right, of that belong to the same application, right? Like this, how I understood it, that this producer wouldn't have like the job or the ID attached to it. This would just be like the application producer, right? So again, I think this is due to the ambiguity and the lack of examples that that are here. That is the reason why there's so many issues. And I think that's why, because I think this is supposed to be, for example, minus, right? I don't know, because like I said, like it's poorly, it was poorly defined, and Andre isn't here to really kind of give us more context. But what I think we need to do is we need to say what source is. If it is just the producer's like application, for example, right, then we get rid of all of that. Then it makes sense to kind of like combine the two, right? This ID would then become action jobs, and then this, for example. And maybe another important piece of information, or another thing that we should consider as well, is maybe instead always making subject source a required field as well, right? So this one is very narrowly scoped. This will always, the source for, depending on how we want to define it, but this is how we could define it, is the source could be like the instance or the region that it's actually being produced from, right? And the source is like the application, and the like the application, and the ID would be like the pipeline ID that was running. So I think that might make more sense. And if we define it that way, it kind of splits them up where both can be required now, right? So yeah, that's one way of doing it. But I think that would solve your problem, right? Is just we need a better definition, and maybe, who knows? As we're defining this, David, it could be we're looking at this, and maybe you're absolutely right. Maybe we're like, hey, maybe we need to combine the two, right? But I think once we start defining it, we should start there first and see where it lands us. And it might be very well be the case that we combine both source and ID for subject. But right now, because things are so ambiguous, when you give an example, I've already thought about it differently. Like I said, like I already had a different definition of source, right? So your example doesn't really give me, it's like, oh, well, I thought about it differently and it would have worked in my case, but it doesn't work in your case because you thought about it differently. So it's like, should we be?
Why I provide this example is we can start the discussion on
Gotcha.
example.
Yeah. I think, and you hit the nail like right on the head, right? Because like it is this difference of how source should be represented, right? So I think what we can do is maybe every week we will spend 5 minutes looking at a particular set of fields, and maybe thinking about some definitions, or maybe doing that on off time and then creating some PRs. But we need to start somewhere and start iterating on it, and we can start small. We can just start with source, because that's the one that we've had most trouble with. I mean, we've even had trouble with it internally when we first started CDEvents. So I completely get the concern here. But yeah, let's do that. Let's I will start working on a proposal. Well, not really a proposal, an update to the spec where it actually defines these things in a more opinionated manner. And I will have a small PR maybe by Friday to discuss maybe ID and source and times, just doing the context fields first. And then we can then start following up with all the other various different subjects. Does that work for you, David?
Yes. If you want some examples, so it's also why I provide the link.
Yeah, no, this is fantastic. And what I want to do too, David, is before I even like submit the proposal, I'm going to start a Slack discussion before I like start. When I start writing the proposal, I'm going to start adding like bullet points in a Slack, and then you can comment on there so we can kind of work asynchronously whether or not that definition makes sense. And if it doesn't, what can we do to kind of like mold it to the one where it makes the most sense, right? So because we got to be careful, because since we're potentially redefining what fields mean, right? That could be a massive breaking change. So we just need to be a little bit careful, but make sure we're doing, we're being opinionated in a good way, right? So
yes, sir.
All right, awesome. Well, I think that makes sense.
Just what I would like to say, it's the links
Yes.
in the comments is the transform GitHub. It's just I link just the output. Sorry, I guess I link the script I used to transform GitHub events to CDEvents, so it could explain
Gotcha.
from where I pick up information. The script is in the config files. So
In where? Package?
Config up, go up. Here
Oh,
is just examples.
oh, gotcha.
Up again,
Oh, again? Really?
or config on the side. It's a top level folder.
Oh, there it is. Okay, cool. And then
Config,
transformers.
transformer, and you have GitHub events.
Okay. Oh, wow.
I will update it to include more events maybe this week, but
Right. Okay. I will take a look at this and maybe take some inspiration based off of like how you're using the definitions and see if we can align on something. But yeah, this is also really helpful. So I will actually I'll just keep this page open for now. But yeah, that'll be very, very helpful going forward. Okay, and then name ticket URI. Oh, turn use is it wait, is it URL right now?
yes, this one is a naming because in ticket we have a field named ticket URI in uppercase URI, and in fact this one is about normalizing and use URL everywhere.
Yeah.
And today for this kind of of feature we have 4 alternatives. I mean, we in a previous ticket we rename URI in URL to be consistent over every place, because sometimes we have URI, sometimes we have URL, and view
Yeah.
URI, view URL. So I say we could rename it ticket URL to be aligned with this approach, or it could be renamed ticket ID to be aligned with the artifact ID approach, where it's a URI also, but a direct access. It could be a subfield, like it's the case for SBOM or for content, or for some subject content, or at least it could be just which just have to change the case, because we don't use if we look, we use for URL, it's only the U is uppercase.
Why do we have like so many different ways of like pointing to
It's
something?
it's also what is linked to the other. It's for because in the case of ID or artifact ID, in some place we reference stuff with just an ID. Some place it's the URI, the full URI, etc. Because it could reference something that should exist outside of the events.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, we need to
So
standardize on this.
it's also why maybe ID and URI the concept should be merged. And if we merge, it means merging source and ID as we have today. It's
Let me see
the
what
relation between both tickets.
I wanted to see what artifact ID, like how it's used.
I use it a lot. Artifact ID is a PURL.
Oh, it's a Perl. Okay, so that is different. I think that's fine because pearls are actually meant to be an ID. So I think that's fine. So this could remain
Yes,
a
but it's
Perl.
this. We use the same into the artifact subject. We have the ID, and the ID is this value.
Yeah,
Else,
this is fine. This is different though. This is like a different thing, right? So,
not it's not exactly, because we have a subject artifact by examples, and in this subject we also have ID source. But if we use something different for the artifact.id than for artifact ID, in a backend system, in a evidence store, it will be a mess to create the correlation, to link both. So today I use the same value for the ID from the artifact and the artifact ID.
yeah, well, these are two different things, is what I'm getting at.
It's for an artifact, it's not two different things. It's
It
the same
is.
things.
No. They're two different things, right? Like, so for the ID, like this is the ID, like, whatchamacallit, the, uh, you know, like when you go like it could be like a Docker image link. It could be like a Helm chart, right? Like or the Helm chart name, right? For example, um, the artifact ID gives you more information, right? It gives you where it lives. It gives you the organization that's tied to. It gives you the hash potentially, right? So it has a lot more information. It isn't just a single like identifier. So I think it's different. So yeah, I think, you know, I don't know, unless you can kind of give a good argument on why they should be separate, because like I
Yes,
said, this gives you a lot
if
more information.
if we just use this service example. So in this service example, we have the artifact ID to be able to link to maybe the artifact, but we also have the environment. Okay, and the environment in this case is an ID or an ID and source, because it should be able maybe to create a relation with the
I think that goes back to the ambiguity again of like what ID is, right? Because when I think of an ID, I don't usually put the environment on there.
but you in the environment in this way. I don't want to have if we have for environment, if we have 1, 2, 3, 4 by examples, and if we use the CDEvents related to environment, we should use the same ID and the same source into this other object, I could say, subject. We should be able to create the relation, and it's the same for me for artifact ID. We should be able to use event related to artifact to link those artifacts to this artifact ID. The same way, we should be able to, if we use events related to environment, we should be able to create a relation between this environment and events related to environment. But in this specific case of service, we have two potential link, because we could have no events related to environments and no events related to artifact. But if we have in our system, it means we should be able to link them to those two subjects.
Can you do me a favor and can you give me like that example with like the JSON and put that in a Slack thread so I can follow? Because like when you're kind of jumping, it's hard for me to follow because I'm trying to like imagine everything, but like it's a lot
Okay.
of information. So if you can put that
Okay.
like in some words, it
If
might help.
open the conformance folder on
Okay.
the left.
Yeah.
So we have we should have environment created, deleted, modified.
Oh, environment created, deleted. Yeah.
So as you can see in this one, we have ID, source, and we have a URI for this environment. So it means that if I want to have the URI from the service, the environment URI from the service, I use ID and the source, and I should have the same source. But it's optional.
This URI is different. This is a public facing URI though, right?
It's a way to identify it. If we go to artifact,
Right. Okay. So to
artifact
which one?
published,
Published? Yeah.
by example. We also have an ID, but in this case, it's the real package ID.
Oh, they actually used a Perl for this one.
Exactly.
What the hell?
It's in my experience, it's really useful because I'm really able to link information.
Yeah, it's more descriptive too.
And it's the
Okay.
same for environment, etc. So we have those two ways. It's always the ID of the subject that is used to link, but sometimes the ID is a URI, the source doesn't matter, like in the case of
Yeah. Okay, let me think about this some because I think the issue is I need to think about this some because the primary issue here is that ID is kind of getting overloaded a lot. Okay, but can you still capture it? Because I'm gonna forget, like, because this was a lot of information. If you can capture that in the Slack, in the Slack, and because when I'm doing the when I'm making the context more opinionated definitions, I want to be sure that I think about this and see if I can solve it in the definition level. And you're right, if the definition of the ID becomes something like a Perl ID, then we absolutely could get rid of artifact ID. But looking at the conformance test, it already makes me think that we could get rid of artifact ID, and I'm not too sure why it even exists now. Let me see.
Okay, I will try to put on Slack or a ticket to open the discussion.
Sure. Just saying who committed this. Oh, whoops.
But using this artifact ID is far more useful for me, because it's not opaque ID, it's ID with information. So it means that I could
Artifact
have
ID is not even in here.
in what?
It's not even in the schema.
No.
Wait.
For an artifact, no.
But
Because
artifact. But you said the artifact ID was the issue, right? So why?
No,
Where is it?
It's not the issue. The artifact ID is a good.
No. I meant because there was two. I thought where'd it go? Oh my God, I'm jumping around too much. Yeah, there's a lot of information. Yeah, this artifact ID. I don't see this anywhere. Oh, it's part of service. That's why.
Yes, it's when other subject want to reference.
That's the issue. Okay, I thought. Sorry, I thought I was looking at something completely different. Okay, now it makes sense. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so where is artifact ID? Is this
It's
in
also part of
creator?
the discussion of ID and source. It's how we
Right.
reference something. Because if in the subject I provide a source, but if in some reference I didn't provide the source, it becomes completely unrelated.
Right. Okay. Oh wait, but this still makes sense, right? Because this subject could be something completely different from this subject, right? This could be a pipeline name, for example. Like this would be a deployment of like, let's assume that we're deploying my service foo, right? Um, you know, my pipeline name might be foo deployment, right? That would be this is my guess.
No, in my for me, for service deployed, it's I namespace it also to have the information. I use the container name, and in the case of Kubernetes, I will use also the deployment name, for example.
Yeah. Okay.
Stateful
So
name.
what I think is happening here is, again, I think we have just bad definitions. Not to say that this is not a problem, but let's first start there. Let's tackle all the definitions first, and then do Occam's razor, where we trim out the stuff we don't need, right? To make it more simple. So
Yes.
I have a feeling you're right that this might go away, but we need to define what this is first. Because, like I said, I assume that this could be like the pipeline that was deploying this.
Oh, no.
Are you sure?
No, it's for pipeline, we have pipeline. For me, service deployed, it could be if something was deployed manually, we should, and if the system is able to say, hey, I deploy the stuff. If it's GitOps, there is no pipeline.
Right. Let me see here. So service deployed.
A new instance of the service has been deployed.
Oh, it's just, yeah, my app. So it doesn't have all the information like the artifact and whatnot. Okay. I can still see that as useful. But okay, let's take a step back. Let's first do the definitions, because that will at least give us some concrete, like when we talk about ID, it's a very opinionated thing, right? I think right now the issue is because it could mean so many different things. I'm having a hard time following what the issue is. And I think once we become more opinionated, the problems will kind of surface themselves, and we can then address them. but I think we're kind of, jumping too far ahead. I mean, you definitely outlined a problem, but I think we need to take a step back and first do the definitions. So like I said, let's work on that. Like I said, Friday I'll do context, and then we can start iterating through all the subject fields, and then kind of getting that sorted out as well. But we need to start with context first. Okay. So does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Because like I just want to make sure, we don't change something and then we become opinionated and we need to change it again. So I'd rather start there first and then get the right definitions. Then we can argue whether or not we want something or want to change something when we're all on the same page with the definitions, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. All right. So I actually have to prep for another meeting here in 5 minutes, and I'm also on call, so I need to drop. But yeah, let me go ahead and start working on those definitions. I'll have something by Friday. I'll block out my calendar, and then please update that information in Slack. If you can't remember, because like I said, it was a lot of information, David. Don't worry about it. I have some of it, what you were talking about, but I think just having the definitions will at least give us a starting point for these discussions.
Okay. Else, I will put the comment of this ticket about source and ID, because I already discussed about the reference, what I meant the reference, how an artifact reference another artifact.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, and we definitely need to be consistent. So yeah. Okay, so yeah, let's meet up again next week, and then yeah, if you have any other issues or questions, please always reach out. And then Rashid, it's always good having you. If you have any questions, or feel free to ping us on Slack. And it was good having you here. So all right, so with that said, I'll give everyone back 5 minutes, and then yeah, we're looking forward to next week. Then have a good one, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.